What a week it's been for radical gender ideology. Just when you think there's a bit of a pushback against it, it's suddenly being forced down everybody's throats again using every power available. John Lewis sent a magazine out to staff who don't have a choice whether they receive it or not, giving advice from the controversial charity Mermaids, which is under investigation right now, on how to chest bind your trans children. The MS Society fired a 90-year-old volunteer because when they asked her to put her pronouns in her email signature, she asked what they meant. Britain's state-run healthcare system, the NHS, said that breast milk from males who've taken drugs to induce lactation is just as good as breast milk from women, even though the drugs manufacturer themselves say it can cause heart defects in babies. And a left-wing local authority in London threatened a pensioner with prosecution after she put a poster on her own door. I'll show you that poster in a moment, but let's start with the MS Society. Charities like this are sustained by the selfless help of volunteers like 90-year-old Fran Itkoff, who volunteered with them for 60 years because her husband suffered from multiple sclerosis. But the MS Society fired Fran because they say she breached diversity and inclusion guidelines. Her crime? When they asked her to put pronouns in her email signature, she didn't understand what they meant. Man, I'm amazed she knew what email is, never mind pronouns. She's 90. Gender ideology is tough enough to get your head around at the best of times, mainly because it's bonkers and doesn't follow any logic. I find this stuff complicated and I'm 27 and dead brainy. I grew up in the 80s. We had 2 genders and 4 TV channels and we needed 2 TV guides for that. Now there's like 600 genders and I don't know how many TV channels. But the MS Society's diversity and inclusion representatives turned round to Fran and said, "Sorry, this is an inclusive organisation. You have to get out." Fran didn't even accidentally say anything transphobic. She's just not fully informed in the latest delusional fad. Why is the MS Society putting gender ideology ahead of multiple sclerosis anyway? People who believe in gender ideology get MS, and people who believe in biological reality get MS. They should be helping everyone and getting donations from everyone. That's what the word inclusive actually means. And kicking out a 90-year-old totally reeks of ageism. They've torn away her social life, her purpose, her reason for living. It's genuinely despicable. But after receiving some pretty harsh criticism, the MS Society doubled down and said that the staff who fired Fran had done the right thing. Recently, a volunteer, Fran Itkoff, was asked to step away from her role because of statements that were viewed as not aligning with her policy of inclusion. We believe that our staff acted with the best of intentions and did their best to navigate a challenging issue. As an organisation, we are in a continued conversation about assuring that our diversity, equity and inclusion policies evolve in service of our mission, and we will reach out to Fran in service of this goal. Man, they talk about a continued conversation, but it's clearly not. If anyone even asks what they mean, they're treated like someone who's asked Stalin a question at the end of a speech. But this isn't the only way organisations are enforcing this ideology. John Lewis sent a copy of Identity, a magazine pushing gender ideology, out to all 70,000 of its staff because it's Pride Month or Trans Month or something. Man, it's always some kind of month. Alongside advice for parents who want their kids to transition, staff shared their stories of identity, like a nursery advisor in bondage gear advising parents on their queries about starting a family. He's a furry who has a sexual interest in dressing up as animals. The best advice I can give to parents is to keep your kids as far away as possible from people who get sexual kicks from dressing up as a My Little Pony. Then there's this guy as well, Sean McLeod, who's a Liberal Democrat councillor. Of course he's a Liberal Democrat councillor, who tweeted last year, "F the TERFs." TERF being a slur for women who oppose gender ideology, for example by not wanting biological males to be allowed to compete in women's sports or be placed in women's prisons. And Ruby, a stunning and brave trans woman who works at Waitrose Brighton. I've seen this face before. Yeah, it's the cowardly lion from The Wizard of Oz. "Dorothy, I just want a real vagina." Ruby's holding a whip in the picture and has a healthy interest in fetish and bondage gear, which is being pushed in this corporate publication for some reason, when it's just who you want handling the bananas. The magazine also contained an article called "Raising Trans and Non-Binary Children" with advice on breast binders or chest binders for parents. This advice was apparently supplied by controversial charity Mermaids, which is currently under investigation by the Charity Commission following safeguarding allegations, and it's been giving chest binders to children without their parents' knowledge. These chest binders are controversial themselves. They go around the chest and force the breast down, simulating the appearance of a male physique, but with the risk of pain and injury, with bruising, malformation and even broken ribs. Dr. Hilary Cass, the the former president of the Royal College of Paediatrics, described them as painful and potentially harmful. It's an interesting thing to push on your staff in a corporate newsletter. A John Lewis Partnership spokesperson said, "The John Lewis Partnership is a welcoming place for people to work or shop, irrespective of their background or beliefs." So if they support all beliefs, I assume they'll be bringing out a magazine next that celebrates Brexit or how to convince your stupid kids of the existence of biological reality. I won't hold my breath waiting though. Multiple studies, including those from the government, show that trans people are at a higher risk of hate crimes and discrimination. So why would you encourage it then? Also, according to actual statistics, it's a myth that trans people are overrepresented as victims of crime. John Lewis Partnership also said, "This newsletter has been positively received by our staff." Yeah, because if anyone questions it, they get fired, like that 90-year-old woman at the MS Society. According to some employees, John Lewis also pressures staff to wear pronoun badges at work, which is compelled speech. Although that's if you still have a job there. They're considering cutting 11,000 jobs as they've slumped to a £230 million loss. Still, I'm sure alienating a huge chunk of potential customers will help. For all the talk of diversity and inclusion, what about staff who find all this gender ideology stuff contentious? Who are worried about men using the ideology to get access to women's spaces, which has already happened at John Lewis changing rooms? What about people who reject terms like cisgender, which is a pejorative slur lifted from Latin to give it pseudo-scientific gravitas? If John Lewis cared about marginalised communities, why aren't they giving a voice to these people instead of a community that somehow has the power to force everyone to go along with gender ideology at the risk of being fired? And criticising gender ideology won't just get you fired, it'll get you prosecuted by the government. A pensioner in London has been handed a community protection notice and threatened with prosecution and a £2,500 fine for sticking a poster on her own front door. A Hammersmith and Fulham council spokesman said, "We've received 8 complaints about these provocative and graphic posters featuring nudity prominently displayed on a very busy public section of walkway in plain view. But looking at the posters, I'm scratching my head trying to work out what's offensive. The posters include an A4 photograph of women with the scars from breast removal surgery or top surgery. But I've seen lots of similar posters and loads of adverts displayed in public, including the London Underground. So why are they suddenly deemed nudity?" I guess the difference is that those adverts were celebrating trans surgery instead of questioning it and saying, "Wait a minute, are you sure it's a good idea to remove your breasts?" The police have been sent to look at the door twice, but had to admit that there's nothing criminal about it. But Hammersmith and Fulham Council aren't listening to the police. They've previously boasted of plans to be the most inclusive borough in the country and are pushing ahead with plans to fine this pensioner. How can we look at China and say, wow, they suppress freedom of speech and persecute political dissidents, when our authorities are doing exactly the same thing here? You might say, oh, but she hasn't been sent to jail. However, Hammersmith and Fulham Council would clearly like to send her to jail, and the chilling effect of threats of prosecution, fines, court orders and police visits is the persecution. The process is the punishment. Hammersmith and Fulham's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion policy state that they measure performance using Stonewall's Workplace Index. Stonewall has been accused of using its rankings to lobby for trans rights, rewarding companies with higher ratings. It's highly controversial and basically a mafia-style shakedown. If you give Stonewall money and promote their ideology, you get a badge that says that you're a good organisation, and Stonewall won't accuse you of transphobia, like the Sopranos saying they won't smash your windows in. Gender ideology is now taken as gospel in every part of the public sector. This week, an NHS trust said that breast milk produced by males who have stimulated lactation by taking drugs is as good for babies as that produced by a mother who's given birth. They also recommend calling it human milk or chest-feeding milk to be inclusive. Bitty. Inclusive bitty. This is just going to become the next esoteric hipster milk. First they had soy, then almond, then oat milk. Now people dressed like Orthodox Jewish lighthouse keepers are going to be going into coffee shops in London asking for a flat white with transgender mother milk. I'd rather have hipsters drinking it than babies though. Saying artificially stimulated milk from a male is as good as natural milk from a mother is like saying cocaine is as good as going for a run because they both make you sweaty. Why would you force a baby to suck on the hairy chest of a male on drugs, using the baby as a prop in their own compulsion? It's insanity. The NHS Trust also reference a 2022 study that found that milk testosterone concentrations in artificially stimulated milk were under 1% with no observable side effects in babies. But this study just lasted for 5 months. No long-term data was obtained. But Janssen, the manufacturer of domperidone, which sounds like a posh champagne but is actually one of the drugs used to make males grow tits and lactate, they themselves recommend against it being used for women when they're nursing because of possible side effects to a baby's heart. And newborn babies have to expend a huge amount of calories to nurse. But hey, who cares about causing heart defects in a newborn baby when there's the feelings of adults to worry about? Another academic study said we shouldn't be concerned about any negative impact on the baby because even if it causes medical problems to the baby, that shouldn't be the priority. We should prioritise the feelings of the trans women. Why are we sacrificing babies on the altar of progressive ideology? I guess babies aren't as high up the oppression pyramid as trans women. Diversity, equity and inclusion departments have taken over everything, every part of government, charities, NGOs and the private sector. For all that they insist they want a conversation, they clearly don't. They want to rigidly enforce their worldview, and they're using the power imbalance of an employer-employee relationship to do this, or using the power of the state to do this. If it's bad for Harvey Weinstein to abuse his position of power over employees to get women to suck his wee bobby, then surely it's bad for John Lewis to abuse their power over employees to get people to cut theirs off. Hopefully some of these people can successfully sue employers or the state for breaching their human right to hold gender-critical beliefs, as we've seen with barrister Alison Bailey, Professor Joe Phoenix, social worker Rachel Mead, and Maya Forstater, Twisted Forstater. But I feel that these are rare victories against an encroaching, unstoppable horde of gender ideology. Anyway, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a patron if you want to support me making these videos and see more utterly depressing content about our rapid civilizational self-immolation and descent into communist insanity. From as little as £3 a month, you get early access, Patreon-only content, and the warm feeling that you're giving me money to fritter away on ice cream and beanie babies. Okay, thanks for listening. I've been Leo Kearse. Bye. Bye-bye.